Weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. State Senator from Texas, a guy named Roland Gutierrez, got the attention of one Elon Musk, the world's richest man. How did he do that? Well, by playing Class MD politics with Musk's recently approved compensation package at Tesla, which if he hits his marks, and Tesla, more importantly, hits the company's marks, he could be pretty nearly the trillion-dollar man. Here's the state legislator from Texas critiquing that.
On my way to Austin today, and I passed by the Tesla plant, Elon Musk is about to become a trillionaire on the backs of the American taxpayer. Because of Trump's big, ugly bill, this guy, through his shareholders, they're about to make him the first trillionaire in the world. After government subsidies that he's been given, government contracts that he's been given, not just here in Texas and beyond in Washington, you name it. While ordinary Texans and people across this nation are struggling to get SNAP benefits, are struggling to maintain health insurance, auto insurance, just the price of the grocery bill. A family of four, now it costs over $400 a week to feed. How do we make it in America with greedy hogs like this that just want to screw us over and over again? It is time that we push back against this Trump agenda, this agenda that is all about billionaires and millionaires, and give back to the people what's theirs. This is a government of, for, and by the people. We deserve more than a government for a few billionaires to screw the rest of us.
Well, you deserve what you get, and unfortunately the people of whatever district in Texas that he represents have somebody who is wildly ignorant and grotesquely so. Musk responded by saying this: "You are a taker, not a maker. All you've done your whole life is take from the makers of the world. The zero-sum mindset you have is at the root of so much evil. Once you realize that civilization is not zero-sum and that it is about making far more than one consumes, then it becomes obvious that the path to prosperity for all is just let the makers make. Regarding Tesla, the reality is that I have been given nothing. However, if I lead Tesla to become the most valuable company in the world by far, and it stays that way for 5 years, shareholders voted to award me 12% of what is built. Anyone who wants to come along for the ride can buy Tesla stock. If Tesla merely becomes a $1.999 trillion company, I get nothing. This is a great deal for shareholders, which is why they voted so overwhelmingly to approve this, for which I am immensely grateful. And they did so by a margin far more than you won your political seat." Zing. Yeah, and I would also add, too, that Elon Musk is greedy. Of course, I don't want to go, full Gordon Gekko here, but Elon Musk acting in his self-interest has served the interests of millions and millions and millions of people the world over. And I'm not just talking about people who buy Teslas. Neuralink and the medical advances that are happening through Neuralink, Starlink, and the access to the internet, particularly in distressed areas of the world like Ukraine, so people can communicate. They're not cut off from the outside world. Government contracts? You mean like the contracts with NASA, such that Elon Musk saved those stranded astronauts? Was that greed? And by the way, of course, some of those government contracts predate the Trump administration and persisted through the Biden administration. It's really the sort of smear job that I find particularly reprehensible because the facts are so accessible. The distortion so purposeful. It's sort of the disgraceful conduct in our politics that turns so many people off of it. So that's nothing particularly to do with our next guest other than Elon Musk's important role in this AI revolution that's occurring. I'm not compelling Frank Diana to comment on that, but I did want to get that in, and so I did. Frank Diana is principal futurist at Tata Consultancy Services. He writes at frankdiana.net. Frank, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me back again.
So with respect to the ambient city, I posed this question to tease our discussion, so I'm going to let you get right into it. I read your piece about the ambient city that may be forthcoming. Very interesting. But the sort of question is AI a technological revolution that won't just change how we operate, but will change the human being's very existence? And you sort of developed a framework to think about that, and I wanted to get your perspective.
Well, thanks for positioning it that way. Yeah, it's a framework that really looks at the various what we'll call general purpose technologies of history, electricity, steam engine, printing press being some examples of those, and how they evolved over years. But the evolution seems fairly consistent in terms of progressing from a current state, which we find ourselves in today, to ultimately changing the systems of our world. And this obviously happened throughout the various centuries. And so the question becomes, is artificial intelligence likely to become one of those general purpose technologies? And if it does, do we have a framework to think about how it evolves? And so the ambient city is an example of just one place that changes fundamentally if AI brings intelligence to the city in ways that alter mobility, alter energy, alter how we learn in a given city. Those are all dynamics that are already in play, and it's just a function of just how far AI goes.
Well, I mean, give us the progression, too, so we think about it, with references to perhaps the world that we're familiar with, even if we didn't live in it, and the world we are familiar with that we're living in. So what preceded where we are today and what's coming with AI? Because there's sort of stages to it.
Yes, exactly. And so if we use electricity as that example, in the current state, the factories of that era, let's just talk, early industrial revolution, were run by a steam engine, and there was a central shaft that all the machines were attached to. And when electricity came around, the first instinct was to just replace the steam engine and gain some efficiencies. So we'll call that a point solution, that where electricity is applied, but not in ways that changes anything. The broader application stage, which is the next stage, where the machines got their own motors. And as they got their motors, the shaft was retired, and each motor could be turned on and off independently. So now you're saving all kinds of money, but fundamentally now you're altering the system because the workflows of that era in the factory changed. And then ultimately, the mass production era, the Ford model, the way factories fundamentally just changed considerably, is a system-level change, which is the end state of these technologies. So if we apply that kind of frame and we view today's world, let's just say the city is really an assisted city, it's still pretty static. The knowledge and intelligence in that city is very siloed. In our current state, the point solutions start to apply it to things like traffic management more effectively, water leaks, finding them sooner. But ultimately, all those intelligences get linked. And so now the city becomes very coordinated. Let's say that's the broader application phase. And then ultimately, the system-level change means that in our cities, what we do in our cities fundamentally is altered. If we learn because the communities are letting us learn in ways we never did before, let's just say that our libraries and our museums and our community spaces are all connected, and that connection allows for a learning that we just couldn't achieve before. That's sort of starting that system level change, if you will. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's sort of like somewhat. You can conceive it sort of like with perhaps references to a favorite sci-fi film, but it is hard to conceive and think about all of the implications in terms of this coordinated 24/7 city that is doing things faster and finding problems faster, where all the major infrastructure is connected and essentially operating autonomously.
Yep, absolutely. And through that autonomous operation, things like testing policies out quickly with digital twins before you implement them to understand the impact of those policies is a governance kind of phenomena that could happen as these things get connected. Think in terms of crises and events that happen that maybe we can understand before they happen, and the response is much better as a result. All those things are things that can happen if these intelligences connect.
Yeah, and I mean, and so and there's political questions to this too, in terms of people that are open to adoption versus people that are resistant to adoption, because this might have impact, for example, on, I don't know, the 30,000 people that work for the city of Chicago, if you don't need 30,000 people working for the city of Chicago, and the union contracts and so on and so forth. But I mean, but just from a technological perspective, I mean, is this something that is a matter of a handful of years in the offing, potentially?
One more time, say that again.
I mean, is what you're describing, the ambient city, is this something that could be in the offing from a technological perspective solely somewhere in the relatively near term?
Oh, absolutely. There are places around the world that are already implementing aspects of this in sort of their smart city agendas. I've talked to some of them very recently, actually. And so a lot of this is already in flight. Now, it's all groundbreaking. It's all new. So there's a learning that's happening as these cities attempt this. But, interesting things like how tourism might change. There are places in the world that see a loss of culture as the younger generations think a little bit differently. And so these cities even start to bake in retaining culture. As you walk down a city street, the buildings of that city talk to you about their history, or you walk through, a religious facility, and it talks to you about the religion of that time. And so, think about how these things.
So I walk past the Biograph Theater in Chicago, and the theater tells me this is where John Dillinger was killed.
Yeah, you get all of that sort of history. So think about that. That's an example of ambient learning. Right, learning is surrounding you as opposed to institutional-based, education-based learning, and if that plays out, then the question of how do we become as humans? I mean, what is learning, or what is education in a world where anything you could ever imagine is there for you? Right, you can just get that knowledge walking through the streets.
Absolutely. And so, the power behind this, right? So the power to fuel the technology in this AI revolution. So the more I'm reading about this, the more it's like, we're talking so much about these huge data centers that are being built and suburban sprawls, and they need to be near water, and these cities that are being stood up in small town Oregon and elsewhere where they have land that's accessible, that's close to water, and you have these boom towns essentially springing up right now where Amazon and other and AI companies are building. But then I read like Teslas. What happens if you've got tens of millions of Teslas sitting in driveways, like in a car lot, with 1 kilowatt of inference capability each? String them together while parked. Suddenly, you're running 100 gigawatts of distributed AI processing. The whole point about Teslas not being a car but being a robot, and that capacity. George Gilder wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal last week, and George Gilder's been writing about technology for half a century. That the data centers are not, they're almost, he basically is suggesting they're going to be obsolete in the very near term while they're under construction, because we're going to move to microchips that are like wafer size and small, like data modules, not the need for these massive centers. I mean, is how fast the technology is moving, even on the infrastructure piece of it, in terms of what we're going to need and how it's going to be delivered?
Yeah, it's definitely moving fast. And that example that you gave in terms of the cars providing energy is, I keep using the term ambient, but that's the point. Ambient energy, which basically says energy surrounds us and is available to us in different ways that we're accustomed to. But it doesn't mean that there isn't sort of a transition period where there's bumps in the road, right? I mean, we still have these massive data centers that are being built, and they're still going to draw on all kinds of energy to fuel this AI revolution. And so, there's still a problem area here at some point while we build this ambient energy capability. So I think what you described is spot on, and the technology is going to be there, and it's there at some level, but it's going to take some time.
And just quickly, we talked about this a bit last week. Wanted your perspective on the humanoids, especially for home use. You've got Elon Musk's Optimus, and you've got some others like Neo, and one is autonomous, the other is sort of supervised back at the headquarters, so to speak. I mean, where is like sort of something approaching mass production of humanoids that we're going to see people using in their homes and businesses?
So that accelerated considerably on the back of the ChatGPT moment in generative AI advances, because now these robots have the capacity to be aware of their surroundings. So situational awareness was one key problem with these robots, and we're solving that problem. Dexterity is improved. And so as you think about the rapid pace that we've seen just in the last 2 years, now it becomes real that we can start to apply these humanoid robots in human settings in ways that mimic what humans have done historically. And so a great example, which is really attacking a core problem, is the elderly aging in their homes versus in a home. With a humanoid robot there to provide service and support, even companionship at some level. And so you see the need, and I almost believe that there's synergies here where we're actually solving some problems and creating some others, but this is a good example of the elderly being supported by a robot solving a problem.
Frank Diana is principal futurist at Tata Consultancy Services. He writes at frankdiana.net, frankdiana.net. Frank, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me back.
And he joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Your show keeps me alive during the week. There's nobody I'd rather listen to between 5 and 9 in the morning than you guys.
On AM 560, The Answer.
Hi, this is Sean Thompson. When you take your grandkids to Disney, do they know what's in your investment portfolio? Do they even care? They're busy having a great time, and you're busy making memories. At Alpha Wealth Group, Tom Fortino understands the nuts and bolts of retirement planning. The investments, the stock market, taxes, Social Security, Medicare, and much more.